So today, anyway, we're going to go back over just the ending of last time, sort of as a review, sort of because it's so really important, and then finish with issues in Dante. Okay. Now, so Beatrice leads Dante to soup up his love by becoming the most attractive object that there in the world. And then she gets out of the way and lets his love, like an arrow going to a target, just go to its object, namely God, because she's got his love souped up to such an intensity because she's so beautiful and so attractive that no object in the world can satisfy it, and only God can satisfy it. And that's fine, except that, of course, that Beatrice drops out of Dante's life. Now we have to go over that and how that happens. And I'm torn between two pieces of paper here, so I want to know which to do. I think I better stick to this for a minute here. So I want to put a missing piece in here, that Beatrice is, for Dante, the incarnation. I mean, she's his God figure up to a point. I mean, it's confusing because in the end, she's going to drop out. But she's the one who got Dante clear up to the end. She does what Jesus does. She incarnates God as much as you can incarnate God, and then gets out of the way. See, what's interesting about that is that that means that you get rid of what you really cared so much about. That is, all the things in the world that mattered, even the most important things in the world that mattered, even Beatrice for Dante, and even Jesus for everybody, in the sense that Jesus is the ultimately lovable, adorable, defining object in the world that is, but even, and that's even very weird, that even Jesus drops out. It was bad enough that Beatrice, who's been the most important thing in Dante's life, who's given him his identity, the meaning, she's his lady, you get defined by your lady, even Beatrice drops out. And it's even more disconcerting when you look back at the Divine Comedy and realize that that you've been waiting and waiting for Jesus, and in the middle of that procession where you think Jesus is coming, and the angels are singing overhead, it turns out to be Beatrice. So you think, well, that's interesting, that's terrific, but now where's the place for Jesus? Well, there isn't any. That's what I want to go over in detail for a minute. So let's go over it by starting where we left off last time. So Beatrice takes Dante up to the point where the only object that can satisfy his adoration is Beatrice, and then on to God. So what we're on, those of you who have the sort of handouts, the stuff on B-Space from the Paradiso can follow this. I'll give you the lines and pages. So when I give page numbers, it's in the Chiardi. And so here we are. He's been led up to this point by Beatrice, and then he wants to talk to Beatrice and ask her some question on 340. And he says, I wheeled about to question my sweet lady. We're at line 55. On certain matters concerning which my mind was still in doubt. One thing I expected, another greeted me. I thought to find Beatrice there. I found instead an elder in the robes of those in glory. And that's, and then at the bottom of the page, at line 65, where is she? I cried in sudden dread. To lead you to the goal of all you wished, Beatrice called me from my place, and so forth. And then on to line about 73, next page, 341. No mortal eye plunged to the last bounds of the deepest sea has ever been so far from the topmost heaven to it. Oh, no, that's not what I want. I was then from Beatrice. No, that's not what I want. But I want to go to line 85. He says to Beatrice, he sees Beatrice way up in the rows, as if she was at the top of a mountain and he was at the bottom of it. She's gone back to her place in the rows where they sit to contemplate God. And I just want to emphasize that she's not been the truth, but only the way. Remember, in the Gospel of John, Jesus is the truth and the way. That is, I take that to mean that it's the way you get to the absolutely fulfilling, absolutely meaningful, whatever it is. And it is the absolute meaningful, whatever it is. But in the case of Beatrice, and really, I mean, insofar as there's any case about Jesus, they turn out to be only the way. They turn out to be what gets you up to the top level of the amount of love you're capable of, and then they get out of the way. And then you're at the truth, where that's God's radiance that they're all contemplating. So, and I just wanted to read you the place where it's clear that she's the way. Dante says on line 85, I'm still on page 341, to Beatrice, you have led me from my bondage and set me free by all those roads, by all those loving means that lay within the power, your power and charity. But I just want to emphasize, she has led him to this point, and that's what it is to be her job. But she's not the object of contemplation, finally. And that's what we have to understand more. So why does Beatrice drop out? Well, it's because he's got this view of God and this view of desire, Dante has, and got it from St. Thomas, got it in a version from Aristotle, that God has made us desire him, and nothing can satisfy that super desire but God. So Beatrice is bound to drop out. God is the all-fulfilling one. And so you get it on page 329. We're now in Canto 30, line 42. My favorite line, trying to describe why God is so totally fulfilling, or not why God is, that God is totally fulfilling. So he says, at the top of 329, light of the intellect, which is love unending, love of the true good, which is holy bliss, bliss beyond bliss, all joys transcending. I think that's interesting. I hope that's a good translation for two reasons. Let's start with the second one. There's bliss is what you get when you contemplate God, the Supreme Being, directly. And I'm going to say more about that in a minute. But joy is what you get when you relate to another human being. I don't know if anybody else knows this, but I swear this is my insight for the semester. The joy and bliss are entirely different moods, and they have entirely different results. Bliss, when you have bliss, you're blissed out, as we say. That's important. I mean, you disappear in this total, ecstatic, annihilating kind of experience. When you have joy, you relate to somebody else or something else, and you get very clear about them and about who you are. You get individuated, not annihilated in joy. And I think it's wonderful and no coincidence and very illuminating that Dante's all about bliss when you get up to the end of the track. And Luther, if we had time to read him, you would see, but I'll read you quotes just next time when I talk about Luther. But Luther's all about rejoicing and joy. Luther doesn't like bliss. He doesn't like monks. He doesn't like mystical experiences. He likes joy. And I would hope that Jesus also doesn't bliss people out. It leads them to have this very clear sense of who they are and have agape love for all the other ones, and that is rejoicing. And Luther is very clear about it. I mean, I didn't put it in here, but he talks, Luther actually wrote music for the service of Lutheran Christianity, and he describes in the preface to the music his music stuff that it's to express our rejoicing, and others will hear our rejoicing and join us. This is really, Bach is the one. How many probably don't like Bach yet? I didn't like Bach when I was your age. I hated Bach. Does anybody like Bach? Well, Bach is, of course, the one who's got this Luther rejoicing. He's the ultimate version of it. And it's certainly not annihilating. Okay, I'm trying to say too many things at once because this is such an interesting moment in the book. So you get this highest kind of bliss, which is totally fulfilling. And you experience all of creation in a completely mono way. That is, you see how everything is integrated together. On the middle of 363, line 85, I saw within its depth, he's looking at the God vision now, how it conceives all, I forgot something which I just discovered and which I now don't want to forget for future. Let me think. At the top of 329, there are two things interesting about that quote. Again, I certainly hope for once I'm trusting the Italian. I hope are you here? Tell me if I'm making this up or Dante's really got it. Two things. One, the first part I almost forgot. Light of the intellect, which is love unending. Intellect, that is weird. I love it because it shows how, if it's true, how Dante has been seduced by Aristotle and St. Thomas into making all this such an intellectual kind of thing. Why the intellect? Well, because God has put all this intelligibility in the world, and now you can see all the intelligibility in the world. But why shouldn't it be super mood, love, instead of intellect? That's how it looks in the Gospel of John, and that's how it looks to Luther. And what's happened is that Aristotle, and I'll have more to say about that in a minute, has obviously sort of taken over the Christian message. It's not Aristotle's fault, really. It's the fault of these Christian philosophers trying to use the ideas of the Greeks to express their Judeo-Christian experience, and they can't. So anyway, light of the intellect, very odd, which is love unending. There's lots of stuff in love that isn't intellect. Love of the true good, which is holy bliss. Bliss beyond bliss, all bliss, all joys transcending. I read that as trumping all joys, not being the highest level joy. I mean, if the story I'm telling about bliss and joy, bliss just gets you beyond joy. Joy, you're still sort of sitting there as an individual, enjoying Beatrice, enjoying the way the world is made. But transcending that bliss is, transcending that joy is something else again. I want to keep saying, what Dante is having is the experience of being wiped out, which is not the experience of joy and rejoicing. Good, you want to say something? Yeah.
So you're saying that the pinnacle experience for Luther would be...
Yes. Terrific. Yes, definitely. For it would be Aeschylus. It's definitely, we don't have a good word for it, but we use the word, I guess, patriotism. The mood is one of, see it with wonder and awe and total, happiness of some sort. The Athenians are seeing that Athens is the best thing ever around. Okay, so and Homer, what are you getting in Homer? You're getting something more like awe and gratitude for all the time. Beautiful things are shining, and you are there enjoying the shining. You're not blissed out by the shining. You're not wiped out by it. You are enjoying it, I think. So you're asking, and now you ask the really hard question. What's the mood? And all this about moods is sort of I don't know whether anybody else talks about things this way. I sort of want to warn you every once in a while that if you start talking about this course to other people, which is a good thing to do, you may discover that they think this is completely weird to think that the moods are so important. But I do think they're important. And I do think that then Paul understood that agape is the most important mood and the most important whatever that Christians can have. Remember from Corinthians, there's faith, hope, and love, and the highest of these is agape. And what is that? Well, that's a special kind of rejoicing to be with the others in the Christian community, and all of you freed from sin by Jesus' sacrifice. This is how Paul understands it. That's what he tells in his letters to the Christian community. So, you're happy with that? You were on the right track. Yes. You always want to ask yourself, what's the mood? Anything else? I'll go back to this final chunk. Yeah. What about that?
Makes unsatisfying what you're saying about bliss. It seems like you precisely learned how your intellect.
That's right. That's right. So maybe intellect is wrong, but I think bliss is right. But you force me to my trump card, but of course could also be wrong. When you're in the translation, you're always on slippery ground. If you want to know what's the final experience that Dante is having, which is the extreme experience, which is finally going to be his experience once he dies for all eternity. It's contemplating God. That's called the beatific vision. And I agree with what's your first name? I'm sorry, Jeremy. I agree with Jeremy that it shouldn't be intellectual. Couldn't be intellectual. So he's saying, well, if it is intellect, then it can't be blissed out. And I'm saying, right. Therefore, it is blissed out. So it can't really be intellectual, but it's being sort of, presented somehow through Aristotle categories. And for Aristotle, one relates to the prime mover as the most intelligible something or other. But it isn't what happens to Dante. Here's what he says at the very last lines. I want to say this is being wiped out. This is not intellectual. Here, but of course it could be the translation. But here's what happens. Here, Dante speaking, my powers rest from their high fantasy, but already I could feel my being turned as a wheel whose motion nothing jars by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. So what he's got, finally, it isn't agape love, for sure. You're not going to get around to having agape love with the stars. But it's some kind of very attractionness. It's the ultimate desire satisfier. And when he's got it, if I understand this right, then I think he's wiped out. He's nothing but, his being is nothing but the movement that moves the sun and the other stars. And what movement is that? It's the movement toward being drawn into the sort of activity of the turning of everything around the prime mover, which is or it isn't a who exactly, it's God. But funny how it's not a very much of a who in here. The supreme being, which that's Aristotle's term for it, is drawing, I don't want to say you anymore, is just drawing this, bliss out of you, and when it isn't you, you're just blissed out. That's how, so the question is how we get intellect. The problem is how are we supposed to relate the, what is it now? Light of the intellect, love unending, to, I am being turned by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. How intellectual is that love? People have ideas. I'm glad to see. We got lots of questions. Yeah. Wait, I can't say it again? Yes. You think I see, I did skip that. And instinct and intellect balanced equally. I had no idea what that means, so I left it out. But if you have an idea what it means, that's so much the better. What do you think that means? I see. Well, you're right to be instinct and intellect balanced equally. I bet that isn't in the Italian, but I don't know what is. Yeah.
Intellect and agape love, like that's the pathway to reaching the bliss. And then once you attain the bliss or you become the bliss, you no longer need those things because you're already in the presence of God. But to gain the goal, you need to acquire your intellect and the instinct for agape.
Okay, I like everything you say, except that I don't think it's agape. I mean, we're all in a very important thing, and so it's worth going on discussing it. I mean, Jesus is the proper object of agape and shows it, and it's contagious, and they all feel it, and it's a kind of joyful mood. You can't have agape for the sun and the other stars, and they're sort of rotating. Whatever, that's got something to do with having a kind of desire, and it's fulfilled. Whereas the agape is not about desire at all. It's about your overflowing care for whoever you're with, for all.
If you have agape, you no longer have.
That's right, but it doesn't satisfy desire. These are complicated things. I mean, it isn't as if you desired agape and you finally get it, or desire something and you finally get it. Agape is, and that's why it's so interesting, well, only you can have it between people. And Jesus, as a person, is where you have it. You can't have it towards the supreme being, the ultimate intelligibility of the universe. What you've got, in fact, well, again, I don't think there's any you left when you've got it, but whatever it isn't something that you see what I mean, which is how you relate to something which satisfies all your desires. That's not the feeling you have in the presence of Jesus, presumably. What you have in the presence of Jesus is the joy that we're all together in this, supporting each other and ready to sacrifice. Remember, Jesus describes it as we're all ready to sacrifice for each other. We care sort of infinitely about each other, so forth. Yeah, go ahead.
At the beginning of the class, you brought up, why is Beatrice there instead of Jesus? And I kind of have a theory.
Good.
Jesus is because he is the Father and the Father is within.
Yeah, what does he say? The Father and I are one, or something.
To the tangible things, he is God or the Father because they're the same thing. But when he's on earth, he's Jesus. But then, so Jesus has no place in heaven because he is God.
Well, that's pretty good. I mean, the way he, how will I put it? He has no place in this divine radiance. Yeah, but while we're on this subject, I wasn't going to mention it. Do you remember that he shows up in the divine radiance in the weirdest way? There's something like a human face. Let's look at that. And it's as if Jesus' face, but without his body, somehow gets into this. Not that this is going to help us any. In fact, it just shows how hopeless Dante's is, because he's trying to do something he can't do. He's trying to bring together what he calls living radiance in line 110, for instance, with line 130. What he saw, well, here, starting line 129, what appeared to my scrutiny, now on the top of 365, seemed in itself of its own coloration to be painted with man's image. That's Jesus. I mean, it's as if somehow there was no place for Jesus in this story, and he just sort of throws him in there at the end. He hasn't done anything. Ask yourself, has Jesus done anything, interacted with anybody, saved anybody, died for anybody in this story that Dante is telling? Not that I know of. That's Dante's problem. But what happens is, he says, I fix my eyes on that alone in rapturous contemplation. What did he look at? A painted man's image in rapturous contemplation. I don't get it. And then he gets very interested in how, and rightly so, how God and the body of Jesus come together on 138. I yearn to know how our image merges into that circle. That really is. I would love to know how the New Testament manages to get together with Aristotle, and he doesn't find out. What does he say? Let's see. I yearn to see that mine were not the wings for such a flight, yet I wished the truth I wished for came, yet as I wished, the truth I wished for came cleaving my mind in a great flash of light. So he says, I had a brilliant sort of flash of insight how somehow Jesus was mapped onto this divine radiance. And then he says, but he couldn't sort of hold on to it. Here my powers rest from their high fantasy, and so forth and so forth. He saw it. He can't tell us anything about it. He gets swept up in the turning of the universe, period. But now there's been a hand up over here, yours, for a long time.
This is backtracking a little bit, but back to the mystic and part. I was thinking that maybe this could be talking about two different kinds of love. Both the platonic love that we mentioned in love or talking about features, and also like a heart kind of love.
A heart?
Because like when we were talking about Beatrice for example, Dante was first attracted to Beatrice. So that started the whole love thing, and then the platonic love goes into that. Eventually, he becomes saving thing. So I would think that could be conveyed for an actual God.
Could be what?
That he would love an actual God figure even more in both circles and love, or in a tiny kind of way as well as hearts.
Okay, good. I see what you mean. Yes, I think that his emotions and his desires and his intellect are all supposed to be equally and totally involved in this. Yeah, that's right. How that's supposed to work, and how the Aristotle gets fitted in there with everything seems to come together in a way that you don't know how. There's the Plato desire, which gets fulfilled. There's the Aristotle sense that the prime mover is the best thing, and so everybody, what makes it all move is that God, the prime mover, is so good that you just can't help but sort of going deeper and deeper into it, and it attracts you, and the attraction is what moves everything in the universe. So I guess it's important to say, for Dante, God is just basically attractive. That's what he's doing. That's what he's making. Remember, everything moves only because God attracts it by his goodness. That was going on all the time in the purgatory. And now Dante's getting swept up into that force field of attraction. At least that's how I picture it. Not that helps very much. But that attraction must have intellectual and other components, I guess, though we aren't told about it. Okay, now I saw they saw another hand, although if not, I'm ready to go on. But this is so fundamental that we don't want to go on unless we get all we can out of it. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
It's like a very Cartesian problem.
How you gonna be wiped out in what? I guess. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
With the Kantian perspective, two are absolutely incompatible. Either thinking you are or not like that. It doesn't seem like there's anything essentially paradoxical. We're going to have to be glad to see the place in the whole.
You get it, so you. I suppose. I'm not sure about yourself. I know that his being was turned. Boy, the moral out of this ought to be, you got to know languages if you're going to read these great texts. I mean, I'm a pathetic example. If you get into the details enough to really care about it down to the grain where you could really understand it, then you're at total mercy of the translation. I mean, here we are. I don't know what happens when he feels his being turned. He doesn't say I feel my being turned. I don't even know how to parse it. I mean, I could feel my being turned, instinct and intellect balanced as a wheel. Did nothing jars by the love. I mean, it's such an impersonal love the way it's described. One, it's the love that moves the sun and the other stars and is moving me just like everybody else. And it's not even just me, it's sort of my being, whatever that is. I don't think that's Dante anymore. But then but I don't know what any of those words mean. Only if it privileges intellect, which is what I thought it was doing there. The only source of bliss on the translation of 329, light of the intellect, which is love unending, love of the true good, which is holy bliss. How do they all fit together? What's the intellect got to do with love unending? Well, I translated that as what you really desire is to understand everything, and God is ultimately intelligible. The whole universe is intelligible, and the way the whole universe fits together is intelligible. And if you are really an intellectual like Aristotle, or any of the Greeks, Plato too, that's as satisfying and fulfilling and as attractive as you can get. But it doesn't seem to be as attractive as you can get if you're a Judeo-Christian person of some sort who has a God who, let's put it this way, talks. I mean, this isn't Dante anymore. A God that calls you to doing your thing, your vocation, and so forth. That seems to disappear. It isn't as if saying, at the end you get drawn into what finally is really important for you. I have a lot of trouble explaining this because partly it seems to me the person who's understood it best, my favorite Christian theologian, is Kierkegaard. And Kierkegaard's got a whole different story about how it all works. I don't want to be mysterious. For Kierkegaard, what's ultimately important is and what Jesus is asking for is your total commitment. That's this business about being ready to give your life for it. And that's just not what's going on in this Dante version. Nothing here is about how somehow the Christian should be ready to sacrifice everything for them, for their fellows. Okay, you're all looking puzzled. Well, you should. It's puzzling. I don't think it can be made less puzzling. I wish Dante had told us more about it. I bet St. Thomas tells us more about it, but I suspect that if we read it, I wouldn't anyway, feel happy about it. Yeah.
And at this time, they did not know what gravity was.
They didn't know about gravity. No, Newton was about 200 years away.
Significant because this whole God attraction is kind of similar to gravity. And maybe we could, what's the difference between God?
Well, bliss is the difference. When you're falling toward the center of the earth by gravity, or wherever you're going by gravity, it isn't a kind of totally fulfilling experience. So all you can say is it's a different kind of attraction than gravity. It's an attraction, but an attraction which totally satisfies a kind of desire you've got for maybe making sense of everything. That's if you believe the intellect story, or a kind of desire you've got to get us. And here's, I think, what Dante thinks, or should be thinking: a desire you've got to get as close to God, who is absolutely good and satisfying as you can get, and you're just always trying to get closer, but God is moving and you're moving, and keeping up with this tendency to get closer. That's how it looks in that last little bit. Okay, I'll go on. No, I don't want to go on if we got more. Yeah.
About what he sees is what is going to be happening forever. But one thing that we should believe, and one thing that you stress when you talk about hell is that the final state for Christians is not disembodied.
Wow. Boy, does that seem important. But it's a big problem, for me anyway, because that means the whole beatific rows and so forth, all of which looks like it's the permanent sort of architecture of eternity, is all going to just be scrapped on the day of judgment. This is interesting because it's, again, the Greek, you get the impression, if you're following this, and it's my problem because we don't have time to read Plato and Aristotle. But the Greek picture, which is what we're getting, roughly, the Aristotle picture, has no place in it, for there's going to be a day of judgment in which the people get their bodies back and they all leave their seats in the rows, and I don't know what they do. They've been set up to be homing missiles devoted toward fulfillment by the attraction of God. And now the trumpet sounds and they all get their bodies back, and what do they do then? Wander around? And I don't know. It's as if Dante doesn't know or care. There was a place I was just thinking about that. Oh yeah, the way it's so hard, and he's so mixed up because Beatrice tells him, when I died and my body wasn't important anymore, you should have stopped caring about bodies, which seems like just the wrong thing to say in that view, which said, Aristotle's view, which says, among other things, bodies are more real than ideas. So all of this is, boy, is it hard to get together. But who's just said this, Jeremy, the idea that somehow this has got to go with a day of judgment, you never have a glimmer of that from anything after the Inferno, which sort of emphasizes how painful it's going to be. But no, it doesn't ever say, well, the bliss beyond bliss is pretty terrific, but just wait till it's over. Then it's really going to be terrific. But what can that mean? I have no idea. Anyway, so here we are, stumped. But if you aren't, then you haven't really been trying. Okay, let's get back to this. I have notes in two directions now, and I don't know where I am. So everything makes sense. The whole universe is a created universe, and therefore naturally it is created to satisfy us and to make sense to us. It's one total, holistic, coherent, meaningful something or other. And he says this on 363. And it better be somehow, after this whole discussion, important that you get to see this, the way the whole universe is all integrated, makes sense, the way the whole book is bound together. So this is on 85 in Canto 33. I saw within its depth, this is a little clue, what you see when you look into this perfect something which is attracting you so that you are moving all the time. So I saw within its depth how it conceives all things in a single volume, bound by love, of which the universe is the scattered leaves. Well, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know, but it's somehow, what love is there, bound by love. Everything is attracted by everything. Love must mean attraction. That's what anyway, but you do see, it's sort of monotheism, that's sure. Everything fits together in one coherent view. And I had written something about that, but now I don't know where I am. Let me see. And I don't think I need to say more about that. So God has created this totally best of all possible worlds, and we're just in it. I have something about 96, but I don't have anything on 96. So I guess I won't do whatever I was going to do. That's all right. There's plenty to worry about. I don't know where it is, but someplace, line 96, he says that Dante is telling us that God created the world, and so it's created to respond to our desires, and we get this perfect harmony where all conflicts are reconciled, all desires are fulfilled. That's how good it is. It's a divine comedy. That is, not that everybody's laughing all the time, but that it's not a tragedy. That is, a tragedy is when there are irreconcilable conflicts, like poor Agamemnon having to sacrifice his daughter, or Orestes having to kill his mother. Here there are no any conflicts, and that means that it's a terrific world. But it's also a world which seems to me, and I think it seemed to Luther, I'm sort of setting you up for the move from the Protestant, from the Catholic Aristotle to the Protestant Luther view. It could be seen to be a disaster, this whole thing. There's one being in which all the beings are bound up together, and they can satisfy all desires for what we hear of as secondary goods. Everything embodied, historical, political, and personal, can be completely satisfied. But once you do that, it becomes so meaningful that it looks like there's nothing you can, say about it or do about it. Again, I'm just back to that where we were. So you got this world in which, see, it's like this. I can show you how it is. The interesting thing is, what happens to Dante's love of Beatrice, and you can get a clue if you look at what happens to Dante's view of politics. All these other ways of life besides just sitting in the attraction, or moving in the attraction of God, all of them fit together, and all of them are satisfy your desires. But when you finally get to God, He satisfies all your desires. What happens to all the other things? I made a list of them, which would seem to satisfy your desires. Historical, political, people, personal things. It looks like they just disappear. So you can see it in politics. So Dante's a very political person. He's been taking sides in all these inner warfare things in Florence, and he got on the wrong side, and he got exiled. I have no further ideas about it, but I don't think it matters. But what's important to see is that Dante cares a lot about politics, and he cares about who's in and who's out and who controls the equivalent of Congress in Florence. And you can see it on page 250. I hope it's in this one. I took only yes. So when he's up in paradise, looking back at the earth, what does he think about these things which were once something he cared a lot about and which were very satisfying and meaningful to him? Well, you might think, well, that's great. He loves them all in God. But Dante doesn't say that. It looks as if he just doesn't care for them anymore. That's a funny move, but it happens on Canto 22, line 130. He's looking back now at the earth. My eyes went back through the 7 spheres below, and I saw this globe, so small, so lost in space, I had to smile at such a sorry show. Who thinks it the least pebble in the sky I most approve? Only the mind that turns to other things may truly be called wise. Now, what does that say? That says, if you cared about politics, you cared about who's in and who's out, and which party is winning, well, you're just wasting your time. That's not satisfying. In the light of what you can get if you contemplate God directly, that's a sorry show. And it looks like, at the end of that canto, I saw the dusty little threshing ground that makes us ravenous for our mad sins, and so forth. That is, it all looked trivial. All of this, us here, caring about things, caring about politics, caring about people, caring about ourselves, and so forth. All of that, I take it, is a sorry show once you've seen the world's ultimate light show, namely God's radiance and perfection. So, And therefore you're prepared when you see that how he gives up politics, he also gives up Beatrice. That's what's so interesting. When you get to 340, we've already read it, he discovers that Beatrice was gone. But what we don't have yet, I haven't read it, is, if I understand it right, Dante and Beatrice, for whom everything in the world turned, which I remember she's his lady, have an experience such that they will never look at each other or smile at each other or interact with each other again, except maybe after the Day of Judgment, which I don't have any clue about. But the passage where I was reading about how she led him to this final experience, at the bottom of 341, he says in a prayer to her, line 89, grant me your magnificence that my soul, which you have healed, may please you when it slips the bonds of flesh and rise to its goal. Now, since such was my prayer, and now comes the funny, strange part, and she, far up a mountain, as it appeared to me, so way up in the rows of near God, looked down and smiled. She's happy that Dante's made it. And then she turned back to the eternal fountain. Ooh, eternal. That's a problem, isn't it? I don't know. But now we need to worry about that translation. Because there's no day of judgment then. I suspect that there is no day of judgment. I think it's the eternal is so much better than time that I bet they're stuck in eternity. But anyway, so what's important is, I think, that's the last time she's ever going to smile at him. Why would she ever turn toward him again when she can experience bliss beyond bliss, all joys transcending? Remember, I started by quoting that. Well, you don't have to look at Dante, and Dante, of course, and we just have to make the next move, also isn't ever going to look at Beatrice again. Well, he's going to look into the divine radiance, and she's going to look in the divine radiance. Sometimes people say, and I don't understand it, but it sounds like the right thing you have to say, is you see them in God. I don't know what that means. Dante doesn't say that Beatrice turns back to the fountain and she sees God, sees Dante in it. She just turns back to the fountain, to the attractive everything. And if the earth is just a dusty pebble in space, it sounds like Beatrice too must be just a kind of pale reflection or pale something of the radiance. He's not going to be looking at Beatrice any more than she's going to be looking at him, I think. So now, yeah. Why what? Why did she come to him in the first place? That's a very good question. I worry about that too. You see what he's asking. If it's so terrific that you don't ever want to turn from it once you see it, God, the radiance, then how come Beatrice cared enough about Dante to go down and save him? She's his savior. She went to a lot of trouble to save him. She gave up looking into the divine radiance. Why she did that, I don't know. It depends. I don't think there's any sensible answer to it. At least I don't think for sure. I think Dante doesn't pretend to give an answer to it. Does he? I mean, she loved him. But, I mean, Dante loved politics too, and then it looked trivial. Why doesn't Dante look trivial to Beatrice once she's into the divine radiance? I don't know. If you do, write a A+ paper explaining it. Yeah. Yes, I think that's exactly right, but then, of course, exactly wrong too, because it's the right thing to say, but it doesn't fit into the Aristotelian picture. I mean, why, if the whole thing is this moving, intellectual, emotional attraction thing, how did you put it? Who comes down? Jesus comes down. Well, if you had a place for Jesus, but the thing is that Jesus has been replaced by Beatrice in the cart at the middle of the poem, And now we've got the problem, sort of whether, and that was a symbol of the incarnation because of the griffin. And now we've got a whole bunch of equally puzzling things. Why did Beatrice come down? Why did the church commit itself to saving everybody? Why did, what else? Jesus and Beatrice. Why did anybody do any of these things, according to this? But mostly because of the problem about Jesus, since we don't even know how Jesus fits into this circular radiance. We certainly don't know why and how Jesus comes down to save all these souls. I don't have an answer. Does Dante have an answer? I wish I had.
But after she does, he says this little thing to her about how to let it one way.
Yeah.
But then he said that my soul may please you when it slips the bonds of flesh and righteousness to its goal. So it seems to me that he thinks she's still going to be watching him, and she's still going to be happy once.
In the rose. Yeah. Well, that's possible. Where are you? You led me here. That one, page 341. Okay. So let's turn the page. Okay, so he says it right before it. Okay. Grant me your magnificence that my soul, which you have healed, may please you when it slips that's an important quote. I don't know what to say about it, but it contradicts my view that they're never going to see each other again. Now, how are they going to see each other again when they're all wrapped up in this funny thing that, maybe you can help.
Why you don't think that they'll see each other? I mean, she's been in bliss the whole time, and she actually left and went down and sent Virgil.
Yeah, I think you're right. But then I can just push the problem back one. I mean, that's the right thing to say from the point of view of the New Testament. She ought to be able to go down and care about him and save him again when he dies and be with him after he dies. All that is good Christian thinking, I think. And now it's hard to fit that together with all these souls sitting there totally zapped by the divine radiance. It's a problem left over from Plato. You philosophy people will know. I mean, once the philosopher gets up to the top and sees the good, it's very hard to understand why they go back into the shade, into the cave to help people. Now we got a version of that. Once you've got something that is utterly fulfilling, then it becomes very mysterious what more it could be to do. It would be nice if it was agape love, if somehow she felt ready to sacrifice her prime time presence with the radiance to help him out. But Dante doesn't seem to have, and she does go down to help him out. But there doesn't seem to be any sort of basis for why she does it, since it looks like the only source of activity is to be moved by this perfect supreme being that is turning, and you can get in sync with it. It seems to me those are sort of conflicting things, but what you taught me, and it's all important for you guys to know, that I was wrong. I mean, Dante's got this problem built right into him. He's not denying it. He's both seeming to hold the view that there is eternal bliss beyond bliss available to anybody contemplating God, and the view that anybody contemplating God can take time out from that to help other people come and contemplate God. That seems to me a version of the not being able to get the Greek and the Judeo-Christian together. I mean, you keep hearing me say this. I just want to, it's no coincidence. I mean, what I really think, and what I think this shows, is that you can't put the Judeo-Christian experience into Aristotelian terms, it doesn't work. They're just two very important, very moving, very deep, and versions of what human beings are up to and what God is up to. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe there is a way to put it together. Yeah.
Disagree with this. Charles Taylor has an interpretation of agape.
Oh, great. Tell me about it.
He thinks agape is precisely, it's not loving human beings. It's primarily loving the Father. And in loving the Father, you love the individual.
What text in the Bible, I wonder, does he have it? Because we've seen it in John, not that.
That is the spiritual God, giving love, giving community, loving God. The problem that you end up this loving God isn't a problem. You're loving the community, individual, loving the Father.
Yeah, that's what I said when I said you love these people in God and so forth. That's the thing to say, but it doesn't sound like the agape that John is Jesus is talking about in the Gospel of John and Paul is talking about, which seems to be relations of people to people and ready to die for each other and so forth. And I don't know what to make of that. I wonder where Charles talks about it, where he quotes where he gets his agape story.
It's not putting God and comforting God, but loving all the individuals that are.
Yes, that's right. I mean, that's the right thing to say, except that I don't think it's agape. I mean, that's what we're discussing. That you could have a view like that. Why am I disagreeing? Because I have this idea that the Christian experience in the New Testament can't be put in those Greek terms. And of course, Charles Taylor's a Catholic, and he thinks they can. And he prefers the Augustinian version over the Aristotle version, but for what we're saying, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Some sense of it, do it the other way, not say that Dante is loving Beatrice in God.
Ah, well, that's a new angle.
I mean, images are images of some things, but that doesn't mean that the image itself is just sort of unimportant to me.
Remember, I read that politics passage partly because it seems like if he's going to allow, I mean, it's important to realize that it isn't as if the whole world somehow gets to be put together and redeemed because they're all fitted together in God's vision. The political world, the world of Florence, which was once so important, is just trash. Now, why is that? Why? I don't understand that.
The problem is that we have points to state points.
I see. I see. The petty world is just the bad world. Florence could be. Well, that's interesting. Could be like Athens. Could be a very meaningful experience that you want to keep in when you look into God, you will see it. It could be. He didn't tell us that, but it's compatible. Okay, boy, there's lots of stuff to think about. And I wish I could sort of, at the end, put it all together. See, what I'm trying to do, I keep telling you so you don't feel that you're wasting your time. And you've got two possibilities. You could try to put it all together, which this very good philosopher Charles Taylor certainly tries to do. And he's a Catholic, and he understands the role of St. Augustine in all of this and so forth. That's one thing you could do. And the other thing you could do is say that our whole culture is a kind of disaster because they tried to put together two incompatible understandings of what it is to be a human being and what it is to be a God, which cancel each other out at every turn. And you better make up your mind. You better become either a Catholic or a Protestant, or there are other alternatives. But on this one, you either want to say that you can put the Greek experience and intellect together with what the Bible says. That's one. And then you have a whole interesting job. St. Thomas tried it. Now Charles Taylor's trying it. Or you think that it's the most important thing about our culture, that it's a disaster because it tried to put two things together that you can't put together. And that's what so we're having an illustration of that. And I'm glad you guys here are trying to put it together. Okay. I wonder, no, I think I was going to do other things, but let's just stick with this. Okay, there's this being and everything is put together in it. And then there's my problem about Jesus being just a face with no body, or somehow in the middle of all this radiance. That's a problem. But now let's see. And I want to say that it looks to me like, but everybody over here is trying to talk me out of it, that this becomes a kind of nihilism. That Dante doesn't have to care about Beatrice anymore, or about politics anymore, about anything anymore, once he gets plugged into this totally satisfying radiance. We were set up to seek it, according to God's creation plan, and it provides everything we desire, according to the way God spelled it out. But it does seem to, maybe it's in my reading, but not Jeremy's, for instance, it seems to level everything. Florence, politics, Beatrice, and all of them are sort of less than bliss beyond bliss, and therefore sort of trivial and expendable, since the more you get of the bliss beyond bliss, why would you want any of these secondary things? Yeah.
If we're designed to go toward this bliss, why does Dante need the?
Well, I think I can maybe answer that one, having had a long history here of not being able to answer any objection. Well, everybody's designed to go toward, let's talk about that, because that's one of the other important central themes that gets talked about in the middle of the book, and you never get and if I'm right, then you hear the wrong story from Virgil and others, because they're all talking in Greek terms. But the right thing to say, I think, from Dante's point of view, is that everybody can go off track. Free will amounts to your ability, two kinds of ability. One, to hold on to things that you once enjoyed as a child, which don't really have the satisfaction power that you thought they had. So you are led astray by if you had faith, and if you look carefully, you would see was leading you astray, and you have the power to resist that. That's right. Virgil says that too. You don't want to let yourself be led astray by these things. And Dante was. We know that, by some other woman. And politics, instead of sticking with Beatrice after she died. Okay, so why did Beatrice have to come down? Because although God made us this kind of homing missiles that only could find rest in God, children don't know that, don't experience that, and they go off in all kinds of wrong directions. And we need help to get us back going in the right direction. And that's what Beatrice was doing with Dante. She was getting the love which was meant to be directed toward God, she gets redirected toward God. And then she gets out of the way, and they both just fly up to God. Does that help any?
She's supposed to be viewed as kind of a separate entity, or just an extension?
Beatrice. Oh, I think she's a separate entity. She's a human being, and she really cares about Dante, and she really is his lady, and she really is his savior. If you think that the savior is the the way, that is, she's the one, and your question is about this, she saves him. It was really I'm giving a kind of review now by kind of accident. Remember, it was really the job of the church and the state to get these children and adolescents who are going after wrong things because they just don't know any better, straightened out. So that the state outlaws marijuana, for instance, because it knows better than these children and adolescents, and that's Dante's picture. And the church says, don't worry about it, we just outlawed all these drugs because we got a drug that's stronger than any of them, that's divine radiance. And the church is supposed to be showing that and leading people who are off the track to go back to that. So, okay, so much for that picture, which is important. So the will can get you off the track, the will can get you back on the track, and finally, and this is what I said once before, but I think it's so important, finally you stop willing altogether. And that's related to what you said. I mean, in the end, you get back to being this automatic movement toward the supreme being and so forth. And that means you just stop willing. You only use for your will was to cancel out the mistakes. And once you, of course, either that or you're a really hopeless sinner and you get stuck in this because you reject God's plan for you. But if you don't reject God's plan for you, then all you have to do finally is get out of the way and you'll go zap into the circle. Yeah.
See, like you're saying, once you already
Huh. How does he remain a separate entity once he's been in the bliss? You mean this is a new problem? What? Oh, how does she remain a separate entity? A good question. I see what you mean. And why isn't she just, if my story is right, why isn't she just swept up too in the circles, in the radiance, in the movement toward the perfect being, and so forth? How come she seems to be, all of these people seem to be, sitting there in the rows and being still individual people, not annihilated by the bliss, not blissed out? That's what you're saying. Boy, my whole interpretation might be wrong. It doesn't matter to me whether it's right or wrong for the following reason. My real interpretation is that story is incoherent, and that every time you try to, it's not, I regret, maybe I'll never teach Dante again. I mean, because every time I try to make some kind of sense out of it, I can't, and then I get pushed to this other view. What do you expect if you try to put the Greek and the Judeo-Christian together? But it looks like there's the story in which Dante gets wiped out when his will becomes one with the love that moves the sun and the other stars. And then there's the story about all of them sitting up there in the rows, contemplating each other and keeping an eye on their ones they love on earth. I don't know how to put those two together. And I don't think Dante shows us how to put them together any more than he shows us, and it would be related to this, where Jesus fits into the picture, because Jesus both seems to be just a face without a body up there in the radiance, and he also seems to be, or ought to be, on earth with agape love, helping people get rid of their bad will and become one with the prime mover. Oh, it's just. Did somebody else have a hand up? I end up in trouble every time I try to explain anything. Let me see. Okay, but I do want to. I'm not going to go back to this. I mean, I think it's a fine thing to be doing today. Luckily, we have time, and luckily, you can see how interesting. What you might want to be a theologian. It's so interesting. So where are we? There's one being for all. Tries to keep Jesus. But it seems trivial. Yeah, that's the face. Jesus has no body and Jesus has no job. That's serious. I don't know what to make. I don't know what to make of that. Dante and St. Thomas and Aristotle have really got off the track as far as I can see for Christianity. I mean, they can have some interesting story about God and man, but they better have a place for Jesus in their story. So where are we here? Okay, now. Then, so it looks like, let me look over here now. There's two things. It's related to what I've been saying. I wrote here, there's no place for Jesus except in the sense that he was the first one to be an incarnation, to manifest God's love in the world, however that works. He is the incarnation. And it looks like Dante thinks that there are lots of other incarnations that he makes possible. That's the way it works with Beatrice. Once Jesus has been the incarnation, which Dante doesn't think about or talk about, then Beatrice and a lot of other human beings can be saviors for other human beings, and that ought to be Jesus's job. That is. He would be just the first of the ones who do that. Okay, I'm not going to find what I want here. Okay, let's see. So I think I've covered maybe just about what I want. Oh, but it's sad because I haven't. Oh, yeah, I've got it over here. Oh, I wanted to get to Luther. Now, because, and I've sort of been setting up Luther, and I just have time now to read you what Luther really thinks, like I've been trying to show you. You could think that this whole thing has just all gotten it all wrong, and that we better start thinking about things some other way. I better find it, or else I'll be very unhappy. Oh, this is going to be sad. I'll find it. Okay, in my Luther book, there's lots of various Luther books. This is what I want you to hear. Okay, Luther really understands, and from his perspective, and I'm more on his side, that there's something gone completely wrong by putting Christianity in Aristotelian terms. But I just love the way Luther puts it. He doesn't mince words when he says what happened. He says, it pains me to the heart that this damnable, arrogant, he's talking about Aristotle, this damnable Aristotle, pagan rascal, has seduced and fooled so many of the best Christians with his misleading writings. God has made him a plague to us to account for our sins. That's the extreme anti-Dante view. And he says, I've read him and studied him with more understanding than did St. Thomas Aquinas or Duns Scotus. Aristotle, he says he has. But there's another quote. This is in something which is about what you should teach in school. Now I have to find that or else. And there's more in here I hadn't noticed before. This defunct pagan has attained supremacy, impeded and almost suppressed the scriptures of the living God. When I think of this lamentable state of affairs, I cannot avoid believing that the evil one has introduced the study of Aristotle. I never noticed that before. But now I want to know what you should do, teaching, and I have to find that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't find it. I should have memorized it. I know if I stop talking and discover it's over here, I'm going to be very unhappy. So let me look over here. Hooray! I found it. We're saved. I've got my punchline. Okay. So I'm just going to fill you in for a second. I just got time. A century after St. Thomas and Dante put Christianity into Aristotelian terms. That's what we've been practicing. Luther, at 14, born in 1483, died in 1546, and then sort of the middle of the century there, was determined to rescue Christianity from Aristotle and get back to the early Christian communities centered about Jesus and agape love and expressed in the letters of Paul. You see how utterly different that is the more you get used to it. So he minces no words in talking about what he calls that blind pagan teacher Aristotle. And that people who think that he's more important than Christ. That's what he's really complaining about. And let me read it again, now that I found where it is. It grieves me to the quick that this damned, conceited, rascally heathen has deluded and made fools of so many of the best Christians with his misleading writing. This is supposed to be, from my point of view, the summary of today's lecture. God has plagued us thus for our sins. And what's the bottom line? Quote, the universities need a good stiff reform. It's my advice that the books of Aristotle, which have hitherto been esteemed the best, be entirely removed from the curriculum. Okay, so you won't think I just made it up. There is a real struggle there. And Luther's going to do it in a different way. He's going to not bring in any Aristotle or Plato. He's going to focus on what the Bible tells us about what Jesus was doing. And, okay, now we'll see. Next time I'm going to talk about, well, let's see. Next time is a long time from now. If you have more questions, I'm ready to talk about them next time. Okay, and if not, I'm going to go on and tell you more about Luther and Aristotle, getting ready for Moby Dick.